Hey guys, good evening. So today is yet another challenge. So in today's challenge, we are going to be creating this switch. You can see this switch using HTML and CSS. So this might be one of the hardest challenges because in HTML, we don't have a default way to create switches. We don't have a switch element. So what you do is you convert a checkbox into a switch. So without wasting time, let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to do is that I have a blank HTML template here. And then let's create a CSS file. So just call it style.css. And then before you forget, we have to link the CSS with the HTML. So we just right link and then CSS. And then the reason I like to call it style.css is because that corresponds to the style.css that is auto-generated. So that's all right. The next thing I want to do is whenever you're working with HTML, there are some prerequisites that you need to write. So for one of it is to remove the margins from every element. We don't want the margins messing us around. The next thing we need to remove is the paddings. And then finally, there's this box sizing border box. And as I explained, is that this helps us to prevent issues with working with widths, paddings, margins. Because if you don't have this and you give an element a width of 200 pixels, and then you give it a padding of 2 pixels, then the width will be 200 pixels plus the right padding plus the left padding. So to prevent all those issues, that's why we use the box sizing border box. So the next thing we need to do is to go live. So let's go live. So there is an extension called live server. So let me show you here in the bottom. You can see there's this called go live. So go ahead into the extensions tab and install the live server extension, and then you can continue following along. So whenever you do that, then the project will be opened on automatically in the browser. Let me get this back. So the next thing we need to do is that, as I said, we are going to style an input of type checkbox and force it to be a switch. So how we are going to work around this is, first things first, we'll start with creating a label. I'll show you why we are doing this. And then this label, we don't really care about the for, but we can. So we said that the for in a label points to the input. So I'm going to put this input inside here and I'll show you why in a minute. This one will be of type checkbox and then the ID will be toggle. And then we can close it there. So I'm going to show you why do we need to. Let me repeat this again. So let me take this one away. And then the label I can say my check box. So you can see we have that text, my checkbox. The next thing I need to do, the first thing first, let's add a padding to the body so that the elements are not so close to the edges. So I'm going to add a padding of 2 rem. All right, and then that's okay. So let's go back to the HTML, and the reason we have the for, this for points to the input. So this for points to the input such that whenever I click on this label, it focuses the input. And in our case, since this is a checkbox, it toggles on the checkbox. So let me show you. So if I click on the text, you can see the checkbox is working. So if I remove this for, that's the main reason, that's the main goal of this for. You can see nothing is working. So that's the main reason we do have the for inside there. So the next thing we want to do is that we want to create a switch. And when creating a switch, you cannot modify this checkbox. So what we are going to do is that we are going to lay the input inside the label, because essentially we don't really care about it. We just want to group them. When you put this input inside the label, let me show you. So we're going to put this input inside the label, and then we go to the the CSS and we style the input and display it none. Yes, the input is there, but it will not be displayed, and we are left with just the text checkbox. So the input is displayed none, and then let's give this label a class. Let's give it class of maybe switch. So this is what I want to do. We don't even need the labels. The main reason we are using the label is that we want to style this label. So let's first style the label first. So I'm going to write the dot switch, and then here I want to declare some variables. So declaring a variable in CSS is very simple. You start with the double dashes and then call it the switch height. I'm going to show you why I'm creating this in a moment. Then the height should be, let's do 40 pixels. And then the switch width, let's do 90 pixels. So these are arbitrary values. We can change them if you want to. And the main reason I'm creating this is because we are going to reference this whenever we are creating that toggler. So don't worry too much about this. Those are just variables. I'll show you why we need variables. Is because in CSS, whenever you start hard coding items, when the page resizes or whenever you're working with a responsive design, this will break because you have hard coded some values. So that's why we tend to like use the variables, and then inside we can use the percentages. So let's continue. So in the switch, the first thing we are going to do, the switch is the label. The label obvious has an inline, a display of inline. That means if it is displayed inline, we cannot give widths to it and heights. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to change the display of this to inline block. And the reason I'm just changing it to inline block is because an inline block does not take the whole width, but the whole width, and it does not, and it will help us. We can add widths and heights to it. The reason I'm not adding it as the display of block is because the block takes up the whole width and it cannot lie side by side with other elements, but it could work, but let's stick to this. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to position this label relative. That means I want to overlay other stuffs on top of it. And then I'm going to give it a width. And then the width, we already declared some variables here. So I'm just going to reference those variables. And you reference the variable using the var. And then we grab the width. And then the height, we call the var. And we grab the height as well. The next thing I'm going to do, so that we are not even seeing anything, I'm going to add a background color here. So the reason there is no autocomplete is a missing colon. Background color of black. And you can see our label shows up. So this is the thought process that we are going to use. So we have the label. The label is what you are seeing as dark here. And then what we are going to do is that we are going to create yet a new element here and call it span, and call it, what can we call it? We can call it, this is not actual, let's call it a ball. So I'm going to call it a ball and give it a class of ball. So I have created an empty element inside this box, this black box, which is the label. The input is hidden. And the reason the input is hidden is because, as you saw, whenever we click on a label, the input gets checked. So even if the input is not showing, when I click on this label, it will still check my input, even if the input is not there. So this ball I'm adding, I want to put this ball on top of the label. Let me show you why. So let's go back and start styling the ball. We have given it a class of ball. And then this one will be positioned absolute. This one will be positioned absolute. And then it will fill the whole width of the label. So the width will be 100%. And the height will be still 100%. And then if I give it a background color, you'll see that, let me give it an ice blue, so something like the aqua or aquamarine, you can see what happened. So let me explain what happened. So we created our switch. Inside the switch, we put an input that is displayed none. So this doesn't matter. Even if we put this input outside here and give it display none, it will give us the same results. But now we want to group them together without having to add more elements. And then the input is hidden. Then we create a ball. We are calling it a ball, but it's still like a ball wrapper. This ball, we give it a position absolute. So it is displayed on top of the switch. So the switch was initially black, and then this ball, we give it a width of 100% and a height of 100%. That means this ball's width is exactly equals to the width of the parent. And let me show you. So if I remove this, you can see we are back to the black because this is the switch with the background color of black, and the switch has a width and the height. On top of it, we add the ball, we give it a position of absolute, so it is displayed on top, and then we give it a width of 100% and a height of 100%. So it is exactly on top of that input. And if we give it a background color, you'll see that it will overlay it. Why are we doing this? We are doing this because inside here, we want to create a circular-like ball that when the label is clicked, this ball will transition it to the other end and creating an illusion of a switch. So let's continue. I'm not going to remove that. So let's continue. I'm going to give this a cursor of pointer. So if I go back here, you can see now this is a pointer. So I'm going to remove the background color on the switch because that doesn't matter. And then we still have the background color of the, let's give it a gray because this is what we are going to work with when this is all done. And then the next thing we need to do is now we need to fix the border radius. So something you might realize, this is something maybe you might not know, that if you want a perfect border radius, you need to give the border radius the height of the element. So why did I create variables in CSS? It's because inside here, in the border radius, for some reason, I need access to the height of the parent because I cannot use the height of 100%. So I can't use the width of this ball is taking the 100% height and width of the parent, and the parent uses CSS variables. Inside this ball, I need the height of the parent. I don't need it in percentage. So what I can do now is, one of it is to come here and grab the height of the parent, which is 40 pixels. This is the 40 pixels that is being used here. So I'm just going to give it border radius of 40 pixels. And then you can see we get a perfect semicircle on both ends as at the border radius. So this is the trick. But as you said, this is wrong because working with CSS and you are adding fixed values. Whenever someone updates the width and the height of this element, these things will break. So the best thing to do here is we use CSS variables and we grab the height, and we still get the same result. So the next thing we need to do is that we need a way to position, to add a ball. And the ball we are adding, we want to add this ball here so that we can transition it to the other end. So in CSS, we have this ball is the one that is grayish color and it is on top of the label. So what we are going to do is we are going to use the pseudo elements in these elements. So we are going to call the ball and then style its before. And then what we are going to do, the before, we are going to give it a position of absolute. And then we give it a width of 100%. Now, let's not focus on the width. No, we cannot give it 100% because we want to leave some edges. So here is what I want. I'm starting with the height. So the height, I want the height. So I don't want it. Let's first start with 100%. I'll show you why. And then the width, that is the height. And then let's give it a background color of white. Let's give it a background color of white. And then the border radius here, this one will be a circular border radius, so we can use 50%. We still want to use the percentages, and then we need this one to be seen. So what we are going to do is that now for a perfect circle to occur, we need the height and the width to be exactly equal. There is a trick. So one of the tricks will be we can give it the height of the switch height, and then we can give it a width of the switch height as well. So let's see. So we give it a height of this, and then whenever working with position, the pseudo elements, you need to add a content, and then you add an empty content, and then you can see that shape is seen. So we can change the color to something like red, and then you can see it there. So something else you might realize is that we don't want to use the height, the full height of this element, because now we don't have some. Let me show you. So we need this gap here. So how do we add that gap? We can do it like this, but this means we need a percentage of a percentage, which is very difficult to get. So what we are going to do is we are going to use 80%. The reason we are doing 80%, don't worry about the width. So the reason we are doing 80% is because we want to leave 20% on the bottom and 20% on the top. And then to make sure the width is exactly equals to the height, we can use the aspect ratio. So we can do aspect ratio, and then the aspect ratio we can do 1 by 1. That will form a perfect circle. And then you can see now it's a perfect circle. Let's do the height white color. You can see it's a perfect circle, but it's not in the middle. But this one is not an issue. So to put it in the middle, as I taught in the previous tutorial, is that you can use the top 50%, but now the top 50% pushes it to the top from the center. So we need to shift it back 50% of its width. So that's when we do transform, and then we translate. We want to translate x0, and then y we do minus 50%. And then you can see it lies exactly in the middle. Something else I might want to do is that we need to give it some breathing room from the end. So we can add a left of 10%. So the left of 10% seems to be a lot. And yeah, it's still a lot. We can do maybe a left of, we can try to shift it back as well in the left hand side and see. So that one didn't work out. So let's see. So let's do 25%. Let's do 20. I think 20 looks nice. So we are pushing it 20% back. It's width. So, or maybe you can stick to 0. You can stick to 0. And then here, left 10%. I think 10% is a bit huge. So we can do 5%. I think that looks a bit nice. So the next thing we need to focus on is how can we, now when we click, and when I'm clicking right now is that, the input is getting checked and unchecked, because as we said, the label, if you click on the label, it checks or unchecks the checkbox. So let's continue. So let's continue now. So we have the left of 50%, and then that's it. So then the next thing we need to do is to check whether it's checked. So how can we get whether an input is checked? You just select it and then look at whether it's checked. And then whenever it's checked, then we can style the button. This is how you select the next sibling in CSS. So select sibling 1 or a state. Whenever this is captured, then go ahead and look in the siblings for a match. Then you want to match the ball. So to explain again how this one works is that input checked is checked. We check whether this is valid. Whenever it's valid, this plus goes ahead and looks in the siblings and checks which sibling has this class, and then it styles it. So it will come. This one is grabbed, and then it checks for the siblings to see which sibling has the specified selector, which is the ball. Then it will find this. And then this one happens to be the background color, and then the before of this one is what has the ball. So whenever this one is checked, and then we change the background color to green. So let's see. You can see now it is capturing this state, and then selects this ball. The ball happens to be this whole ball that is overlaid the label, and then it adds the background color of green. So that's it. The next thing we need to add is that we need to transform this to the other end to create that illusion. So how we do that is we still need to get the input checked, then we grab the ball, but now this time we want to style the before of the ball, and the before happens to be this circular ball. All right, that is the before. So we still grab the same state, and then we grab the ball now, and then we want to push this ball to the other end. So what I can do is that I can give it a left of 100%. So a left of 100%. So this one is left 0. This one is left 100%. So the ball will start being creating here. So let's make this one red. Exactly as I said, the ball will start being created from here. So we need to shift this ball 100% of its width. Now we are not doing 50%. We are going to shift it 100% of its width. So how we do this is we use the transform, and then we translate. So in the x-axis, let's do 100%. We need to shift it back 100%. And then in the y-axis, we need to maintain the 50% that makes this ball to be in the middle. So when this one happens, you see that now the ball is losing the 5% we shifted from the left from here. So we need to add yet another 5% here. So we need to shift it by -105. And then we can get the required shape. So if I click, you can see now, let me make it white like that. So if I click, you can see now it is changing, but now the transitioning is too fast. So the transition is very, 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 very fast. So what we can do now is to add a transition to the ball itself. So the ball is there before. So we can come here and add a transition, and then we add it as 4 seconds. So if you do that, if you click, you can see now it is transitioning as expected. So some beauty about using these variables is now if I change the width, the height here to maybe 50, you can still see the ball is maintaining the aspect ratio and everything. If I increase the height to 110 pixels, now the width, you can see the ball still maintains this, because inside here we are using percentages and aspect ratios. The aspect ratio here, basically, the aspect ratio says make the width exactly equals to the height. This is what aspect ratio means. So this one is 1:1. All right, and that's it, guys. That's how you create a toggle in CSS and HTML. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about this, and which other tutorial would you like to hear from me? Thank you.